Okay, well, might as well get started on the New Mexico Drought Monitoring Workgroup call for February. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to get started here. As we usually do, we'll go around and do our introductions and see who's on the line, introduce ourselves. This is Dave Dubois down in Las Cruces.
Raymond Abeta, the Bureau of Reclamation.
Hi, John Longworth. Ward from. Sorry, go ahead.
John Longworth, IHC.
This is Ryan Ward from New Mexico Department of Agriculture.
This is Greg Story for the National Weather Service West Gulf River Forecast Center in Fort Worth.
Mary Yule, BLM.
Richard Heim, at NCDC, the U.S. Drought Monitor Office this week.
Curtis McFadden, Army Corps of Engineers, Albuquerque District.
Dave Simmerall, Western Regional Climate Center and Drought Monitor author next week.
Okay. Anybody else other than Brian at the Weather Service?
Ken Richard for Molly Magnuson for the Office of the State Engineer.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, welcome again. And so it looks like Brian has the agenda up on the screen. And we'll wait for Brian to get the Weather Service PowerPoint up and running. And then we'll get started after that. Okay, looks good, Brian. Go ahead, Brian, and give your report.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Just to give you guys a head up, I have a little bit of a cold, so bear with me if you hear a little bit of coughing or sneezing going on in the background. And I know I missed the last meeting. I had an accident up at Durango skiing and broke my leg, so healing up pretty good, and I'm back, so I'm glad to be here, and we can go ahead and get started with our drought status and weather and climate outlooks for February 24th. So, as many of you know, the first few weeks of February have been very dry across nearly all of New Mexico, with the exception of the far northeast, where we've had some frontal intrusions working into the area from time to time. But most folks across the state, particularly south and west, have really not picked up any measurable precipitation for that first 22-day period. Now, things have changed in the last 2 days, particularly across the north. We've picked up some heavy snows. Speaking of snowpack, here is a comparison of where we were back on January 19th. You can see conditions were below normal, but not too bad, particularly across the south and the far north. We had a few basins where conditions didn't look too good. We were, near 50% there in the southern Sangres. But as we progressed through early February, conditions deteriorated significantly, especially across the south, where we lost more than half the snowpack in the basins down there in the Gila region. Of course, up in the northeast, some reflection of the most recent snows there in the northern Sangres, where we've been able to recover up to about 91% of normal. Now, if we take a look at this map in a day or two from now, we're going to continue to see some improvements, because we saw anywhere from 12 to 24 inches of snowfall up there in the Sangres and the northwest mountains over the past 2 days. Here's a look at the snowpack from the 22nd, the snow depth from the 22nd. You can see conditions pretty decent across the northern mountains and up into Colorado. And then we have the snows, the widespread light snows across the eastern plains, and we see the reflection of that here from the no-risk analysis. Well, January was very good to us. We saw statewide average precipitation generally on the order of 180% of normal. Many folks received abundant rain and or snowfall particularly across eastern New Mexico, where some folks from like Clayton down towards Roswell saw up to 400% of normal. So that was really substantial, and that has really gotten us through this dry period. But now that we're back in the storm track, we're hoping to pick up some more gains. Here's a look at the averages or actually the data for January across New Mexico, and you can see we did tie for the 13th wettest across the state for precipitation. We averaged 1.1 inch across all climate divisions, which was nearly a half an inch above normal. And so it's been several years since we were above normal for the month of January. So this was very good news for us, particularly on the heels of a December that was actually fairly good too. If we break down the January 2015 precipitation by climate divisions, we can see definitely the reflection of that heavier precipitation across the eastern plains. Climate Division 3 showing up with 377% of normal. Unfortunately, the northern mountains didn't pick up the best precipitation for the month, but it was still good. We still averaged 107% of normal, but in terms of snowpack, conditions really haven't been able to rebound as we would like to see. Conditions, again, across the west, still above average for the month, but definitely the eastern plains, the focus for the heavier precipitation. For the water year, we are finally now averaging above normal, 102% of normal for the state, and still reflections of precipitation that we had earlier in the water year showing up across the south and east. So most folks doing okay right now for the water year. And if we look at the graphical comparison here, we're now 103% of normal for the water year, pretty much just right here at the average. Let's look at the 12-month period. Same thing, 103% of normal was 46th wettest period. So this is also the first time for this 12-month period to average above normal since 2008. As we look to the 24-month period, still doing okay for the statewide average, 98% of normal, just hovering below the average line there. But as we look back to the longer term, and this has been really the concern for quite some time, we're considerably below normal, particularly for the 48 and the 60-month period, where we're still in the top 10 driest periods. So while we've been able to recover in the short term, the long-term drought is really quite significant still across the area. So we'll take a look at some of the satellite imagery. This is the NASA Sport Land Information System showing the 1 month difference in the relative soil moisture across the area as of January 20th. And so we missed this in the last meeting, so I wanted to bring this up again. So in comparison to December, the reflection did show that soil moisture values did increase, particularly across central and southern areas, and really across the eastern plains as well. And then as we moved into February, we continue to see some reflection of decent soil moisture across the eastern part of the state, but generally values pretty much around zero for most areas. Interestingly, I looked at this last night and I'm trying to think about why areas across the south continue to show improvements in soil moisture when we haven't seen any precipitation. So that may be an artifact of the analysis. And then across the north, we see improvements to soil moisture, and that may have something to do with the snowmelt that occurred through that period. Here's the NASA GRACE product, and it is also indicating that soils are fairly moist across western areas and up here in the far northeast, but pretty dry still across the upper Rio Grande Valley and in parts of the southeast. Okay, so here is a look at the regional drought status. I know Chuck relayed to me on the last call that folks would like to see more of a regional comparison rather than just focusing right in on New Mexico, so we wanted to add this slide in here. There haven't been any significant changes since last month. We did expand, it looks like, the D1 area into parts of northern New Mexico and then along this I-40 corridor. But really the focus for significant drought conditions is over California, Nevada, and then parts of Oklahoma and Texas. Okay, now let's focus in on New Mexico here, provide a better depiction of the current status. 68% of New Mexico is still in moderate drought status or worse, with 26% of the state still in severe to extreme drought, and those areas mainly focusing across the Northwest Plateau and the Northeast Plains. The 3-month change, you can see that we did have some slight deterioration, like I said, mainly along and north of the Interstate 40 corridor. And then just a little bit here in the Southeast Plains. Does anyone have any questions so far on any of those slides before we move into the weather and climate outlook? Okay, none heard. All right, so this is the 3-month loop of the weekly sea surface temperature anomalies across the Pacific. You can see here in the bottom left, the sea surface temperature anomalies, kind of an interesting pattern this year with how the ENSO condition was occurring. We kind of have this gradient from the Baja region extending southwest, just to the south of Hawaii into the western Pacific. We're hoping to see more of one of these Modokai or the eastern Pacific type of El Nino patterns by now, but certainly not really looking at any type of significant anomalies within this area. And if we look at the 4-week change, it does look like conditions continue to warm across this area to the southwest of Mexico and then down into the Nino 4 region of the tropical Pacific. Here is the sea surface temperature anomaly chart for the different Nino regions, and still this Nino 3.4 region hovering right around that threshold of 0.5 degrees. Nino 4 region doing pretty well here up towards almost a 1 degree anomaly. Now there have been actually some fairly substantial changes to the consensus probabilistic forecasts issued from CBC and IRI. It's been a struggle to develop those El Nino conditions across the Pacific, but so what we did here was we put a comparison of what we saw for the early February outlook and then the mid-February outlook. And if you take a look at this period, as we went into the late spring and the summer period, there's been quite a bit of change, and the probabilities have actually increased for that period. So the El Nino watch does continue for that area, and it looks like for this June, July, August period, we're actually looking at a 61% probability that El Nino conditions would develop. So there have been some modest changes in the outlooks there. And if we take a look at the plume of the model and so predictions, we can see this solid line here indicating the probabilities increasing through time that we would move up into the 0.5 to +1 degree category through the late spring and the summer period, which is actually kind of interesting that we would see the probabilities increasing for an El Nino event during that period.
Summer is a little unusual, but not unheard of. Spring would be more unusual, and that is your dynamic average. So your CPC consensus isn't quite so optimistic, but still they're all positive.
Okay, thank you. And as we've seen on Twitter, there's been folks posting what our next 6 to 10 day outlook looks like in March, and things are hopeful for this active pattern that we're starting to see develop across the area continue. The March 2015 precipitation outlook indicating that we are in favor of seeing above normal precipitation pretty much across the majority of New Mexico and Arizona, and then drying continuing across the Pacific Northwest. temperatures above normal across the western United States and below normal across the eastern parts of the United States. I'm sure those folks are glad to see that after having wind chill values near minus 30 for the past week or so. But New Mexico, we're kind of split here with conditions favoring above normal temperatures across the western half of the state. And as we move into the spring, March through May, that above normal area expands up into a good part of the Central Rockies and much of western Texas, with just about all of New Mexico really in the bullseye for the potential of above normal precipitation as we move through the spring period. Same with the March outlook temperature, maybe not favoring conditions to be as warm as the March period, but generally equal chances across New Mexico. The seasonal drought outlook that was issued here a few days ago, pretty much showing, drought conditions persisting or even intensifying across parts of this area. We'll have to give this a closer look, really, if we start getting into this active pattern and precipitation increasing through the spring months, which is important because typically the spring is dry for us, so that would be good for us to hang on to snowpack if we can keep the moisture in the area. So we've got this map from last week, and I just wanted to throw this up here so we can maybe discuss some changes now, or if other folks want to go ahead and give their presentations, we can leave this for the end of the meeting. I'll pass it back to Dave.
Thanks, Brian. I was kind of looking at that. You mentioned that one area down south that was showing high moisture content through the southwest parts. Which product was that?
I believe it was List.
Was it List? Okay.
Well, even the Grace has this area in the southwest.
That's surface. Okay, interesting.
Here the List was showing, and these values are really not that high.
Right,
but it did show some increases.
Any folks from the El Paso office on the call? I didn't think so. Because I was looking at our far and few between observers down there with Kokoraz, and it's been pretty dry for the past month along the border. So that's it's interesting. Any strong opinions especially up north? I don't know. Any thoughts, Dave?
Dave, this is Brian again. I spoke to an observer up around Folsom yesterday. He said he was out on his ranch prior to this most recent snow that came in, and they were digging fences, poles for fences. And he said that they were going down more than 18 inches, and it was wet all the way down, at least to 18 inches. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
That would be right up there along the Colorado border. And he said he's had a lot of wet snows, probably around 3 feet so far this season.
Well, that's great.
This is Richard Heim. The observation from the farmer about the digging the post holes and seeing firsthand what the moisture is down 18 inches. That's a very valuable observation. That kind of information is very helpful to us.
Yeah, and actually last night after I spoke with that observer, I went to the UNLV page and I submitted that report on that the impact reporter.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I sent that data for him basically through the impact reporter.
Excellent, thank you.
Is that the kind of stuff that you folks would like to see more?
I personally would like to see more of the on-the-ground observation, especially the below-the-ground observations, because we have a lot of soil moisture models, the models that CPC, University of Washington runs, NLDAS, and we have the satellite-based ones that you went over pretty well. But what I would really like is someone getting their hands under the ground and with their eyes seeing what actually is in that soil moisture profile. And this kind of observation where they're actually digging post holes is extremely valuable.
Hi, this is Dave Summerall. Hey, I just pulled up the, I don't know if you guys want to take a look at the scan site. It's Jornada experimental range. It's got a really interesting graphical display with the profile. And it looks like most of the soil moisture, there was a big increase, which looks like it's probably related to a storm about January 20th. And you can see a huge spike in the soil moisture. And it's pretty neat. You can see between the end of the profile, between 2, 4, and 8 inches, there's about a week delay. You could see it seeping down deeper into the soil profile. And then there was another storm, it looked like about maybe the end of the month in January, where it had another increase. But since then, it looks like it's been on a steady decline, the soil moisture. It looks like it's lost about 50% of what it gained between about the 1st of February and now.
And Dave, what depth are you looking at, please?
What product am I looking at?
No, I'm sorry, what depth? That scan 2, 4, 8.
Mean hourly soil moisture percent, 2 inches, 4 inches, and 8 inches. And then it's also got actually 20, and 40, which is, those look like they've been pretty steady throughout the whole year. It hasn't seeped down very deep.
Oh yeah, I see it now.
If you take a look at the interactive map for NRCS and pull up the scan site there, you can take a look at it.
Yeah, they really haven't had any precip since that jump, right around the 30th.
Yep.
Go to site page.
So that's where you may be seeing that wetness from those two events, but it looks like it's definitely been drying out.
You're fine, and view current. The brown.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
There's a graphical display. If you go from NRCS, the interactive map that they have, the new one.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to go from.
Yeah, and then just click on water year chart soil moisture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that one.
There you go.
Yeah.
But you can see down deeper in the soil column, it's really dry. It hasn't done much anything.
Yeah, 20 inches are flat.
Yeah, we've been looking at these scans, although we don't look at the Jornada site very often, but since about 2013, and we often show them in these discussions, when Carrie and I met with ranchers a couple of years ago, we kind of asked them what depths they thought were important. And they said those 20 and 40 inch depths were very important to them. That certainly, they could grow some grasses with shallower moisture. And so, yeah, it seems like the moisture hasn't gotten that far down there. But these other numbers came up pretty nicely and stayed up. So that is kind of a nice signal to see. And would support that list map, I think, that Brian was showing.
Although the 2 inch has gone almost back down to the kind of the background.
With the 2 inches, and I'm no expert in this. We've just tried to start using it a couple of years ago for another layer of information. The 2 inch is so noisy to me, especially, this doesn't have any of the summer months. We don't even hardly ever look at it. We don't usually plot the 4 inch either. We've been looking at mostly the 8, 20, and 40. We're going to bring some of those plots down to the meeting in March.
Oh, great.
because we have found them to be helpful. Unfortunately, several sites are out right now, and NRCS thinks that they're still recording but not posting the data, and we're waiting for them to come here from Oregon and repair them.
Okay. So I'm not hearing any strong tendencies for any major edits to the drought monitor map. I've been looking at my concern is same with, I think, with Dave Simmerall is keeping the long-term stress on the map. Looking at, and I've been looking at the NRCS forecasts in looking at the reservoir storage levels as like Rio Grande Basin as some of my long-term effects. And I think at the beginning of February, they're showing that the total, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Raymond, but I think that the total Rio Grande Basin was slightly less than last year. I don't know. That's something you guys know.
We're starting off lower than we were last year.
Okay, just a slightly less. I think it wasn't a whole lot, right? But that's still, even if it's just a little bit, it's not a good sign. And in terms of keeping the status along the Rio Grande, I think I like to see that stay there. But what do you guys think about the Northeast?
You know, I think based on that farmer's report, I could see some improvements to that area, especially if we continue to see these types of backdoor frontal intrusions and accumulating snowfall. Eventually, when that melts, it's going to continue to percolate nice and slowly down through the soil. So, but we've got that area in Colorado that we would have to also try to maybe collaborate with.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, I'll give Nolan a call and those folks because I mean, basically the question is, does that match a D2? Because that's what that most of the area is. The Canadian. So I don't know if we're going to solve that right this moment, but I think that's kind of our area we need to work on, is the far northeast.
This is Richard. I sat in on the Upper Colorado River Basin Drought Team conference call last week, and they had mentioned southeast Colorado, but they were saying that this time of year the normals are so low that any changes, wet or dry, in that area are kind of inconsequential in the big picture, so they didn't make any change.
Yeah. No, I understand.
Also, yesterday on the Texas drought call, they wanted to improve the D2 to D1 and the D3 to D2 in the very northwest corner of the Texas Panhandle, which would be right next door to the northeast part of New Mexico. If you wanted to make any improvements as far as matching up with the neighboring states, that would be an area to look at.
Okay.
Well, also, while I have the floor, I wanted to make some comments or ask some questions about southwest part of New Mexico. The snow water content is very low there, and I think the sweep precip might also be. My question is, how important is the mountain snowpack in that part of the state?
That's a good question. I know that they've been pretty low, very low, past few years. I mean, and it's really, I think it's the last time I brought it up was last year. I mean, it really has changed. I mean, at least in terms of the impacts during the warm part of the year. Wildfire. I don't know. Because I asked some of the forest folks about that question, and then I don't think there's any the main thing with, that were brought up were the grasses, the fuel loading. I think was important when I brought up the question, and so I know we've got D1 through most of that, and then D0 for part of all of the Black Range and part of the southern. Well, actually, most of this Gila. Now I'm looking at it.
This is Brian in Albuquerque. As far as what we can see here in the near term, the weather pattern doesn't look to really impact that area much. The focus is across the northwest.
Yeah.
For the next week or so, depending on how far south that next trough can make it, the southwest may stay dry.
Yeah, I was noticing the February, on the ACES maps, the February precipitation for the southwest has been dry, but then if you go back to the beginning of the year, January has some good precip, and that tends to affect the percent of normal in the longer time scales. So I was just wondering, the snow tail would tend to justify expansion, maybe filling in that D0 with D1, but the other stuff, you're getting conflicting indicators here.
Well, we had 2 snows. We had one right at New Year's, I think January 2nd. But I think that then it got warm, and I think that went away very quickly. So in terms of the total number, if you look at just the monthly average, it may look okay. But then I think if you look at the snow, like exactly what you're saying, Richard, the snow water equivalent is very low. I mean, look at the 20%, 30%, 30% of normal.
Hey, Dave, this is Longworth. I mean, this time of year, their snow water equivalent's pretty low anyway. Isn't one of the concerns we may have also as the year goes on, particularly maybe early spring, if we see that melt out pretty quick and the winds pick up, that's the 1-2 punch for the fire guys.
Yeah, I agree.
And that would be the certainly something that I think we should keep an eye out, because if that does occur, then our potential for wildfires in that part of the state really intensifies.
Good point.
What do you guys in Albuquerque think?
I kind of tend to agree. I don't know if this is necessarily a fortunate type thing, but a lot of the Gila has burned already. We've probably seen 300,000 acres or so of the Gila burn in the last 5 years. So in terms of burning, it might just be the short-term fuels in terms of major wildfire growth. Now, I'm not a fire expert, so that's just,
you know what? Tomorrow or later this afternoon, I'm going to run into forestry folks. I'll ask them, because I think I agree, and I think some of the areas that really didn't burn intensely from that last significant event was because of some of the treatments and some of the previous fires. But then we had, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, I forget what name that one was, a signal fire or something like that, or burned right up in the Black Mountains there. And that thing was, okay, it wasn't 300,000, but it was like between 70 and 100,000. I still think there's a fair amount of stuff to burn there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, you're
all
right.
gone.
Yeah.
So it's just something I'm just throwing out from just being on the Drought Task Force for the last however many years. That's one of the areas that's a hot spot. No pun intended. Well, I didn't mean to say that, but something to look for. If it dries out, the question was about the snow water equivalent. If that dries out and runs out quick and early, which it's been doing, and we get those intense winds, that desiccated effect kind of thing, that can really just set that thing into a tinder mode and you'll see a lot of red flag warnings being issued to that area. And I think that's a lot of that comes out of El Paso too. So they usually get roped in with that. And of course, there's the weather forecast guys. I mean, they're on top of that. But for the drought monitor guys, I definitely would be keeping that in mind, the wind question, because if that dries out, then that area, A, you lose forage, B, your fire risk goes up. There is endangered species there in the area, but I'm not so sure how intensely they are related with the snow water equivalent in terms of their flows, because it's fairly well free flowing down there. Some minor diversions. I just put that out there.
And just another consideration, I know it's across the border, but it's a source. A lot of the water from San Carlos Reservoir in Arizona comes from that area in the Upper Gila, and that reservoir is sitting at it's gone down since last year. It's about 24% of average right now.
I just pulled up the SWIC seasonal outlook, which just came out on the 11th, and I'm just going through it quickly, but they're showing fine fuel loading and continuity is normal to above normal in the general wide area. I mean, this is a general overall of the area, all over the place, and it's something we should probably look through this PowerPoint a little more, or even give them a call to see what they're thinking. They basically their fire season potential for 2015. They're saying most all the factors point to a delayed fire season onset and overall normal fire potential with some caveats. So I need to read this a little more other than just 2 seconds. And I could circulate that around or just go
but Dave, I think that's great information. Maybe if you could next month, for our next meeting, because that'll be, let's see, we're late February now, let's just say we're going to be late March. That would be the time that I would think we really would want to be, looking at the southern part of the state. I think they've done relatively okay. I mean, they had some storms, but if that changes, that would be something we'd want to incorporate.
Yeah, let me see if I can get a hold of Chuck Maxwell, because he's the guy usually I talk to, and see if he's around. And I think this says the next update is in mid-March. So if we can get that update before our next call, that would be great.
Hey, Dave, this is Barry. I just wanted to chime in real quick. Chuck, Brent, and I were actually up in Santa Fe last week, and we're doing some updated kind of seasonal outlooks, briefings for the East Mountains. I think we have another one coming up next week, actually. And so I know Chuck's point that he made last week was the timely intrusions of these systems as we get kind of deeper into the spring, especially like late March and April. And it's not unlike what we had last year. If we get one system in here, it buys you a solid 1 or 2 weeks. And if they're timely enough and spaced out through the spring months, by the time we get into our full-on monsoon pattern, the humidities are up, and so in terms of overall fire danger, and I think that's kind of Chuck's message, is just the critical timing of these systems, as opposed to, I think what John was saying is, 3, 4, 5 week period of just desiccating, low RH, strong winds, that sort of, because we didn't really see that play out last year,
right.
And it worked to our favor, I think.
I agree. And then seeing that the forecast or the probabilities are above normal, slightly greater, 40 percentile there. I mean, that bodes well. I mean, but I don't know what their skill is with that. With just sort of the El Nino sort of kind of off kilter there a little bit. I don't know. It's something that I guess it's something we should keep an eye on, because if we get the storms carrier, let's hope we get them, because that'll definitely. You're absolutely right.
Okay. Well, let's keep the discussion on. Let's move on, but I think about what we want to address for next call, and I don't see a huge amount of edits. Maybe some areas in the Northeast, I think. What I'm hearing. So, and I'm all up for suggestions on that. So, is that okay with folks? So we can move on to Raymond. Provide the U.S. Bureau of Rec Reservoir Status Report.
Sure. Morning. I'll start on the Rio Grande Basin. The storage is Potoro, 10,812 acre feet. Heron, 62,852. Olvato is as low as 17,308. Abiquiu, 133, 422. Cochiti, 48, 175. Elephant Butte, 321, 722. Caballo, 35, 288. And over on the Pecos, Santa Rosa, 69,270 acre feet. Sumner, 47, 695. Brantley, 84, 259. And Avalon, 3709. Like we said, in the discussion, right now, there's nothing really to write home about as far as the snowpack. Hopefully these cycles will produce something for us. I won't go over the numbers. I'm sure that the NRCS is probably going to go over that. But it's anywhere in the high 60s to low 80s in the numbers, percent of normal. Like I said, if we can get some, that really helps us, because snowpack, instead of early and turning hot and windy, and that really kills us as far as operations on the both basins. But if we can actually get a real runoff, and it can, melt off in a moderate rate, then that can get us closer to the monsoon season, and provide flow for both irrigation and base flows for the endangered species, and then get us into the monsoon, and then that'll help us, So we're hoping we get some help from Mother Nature this year again. Long, hard, dry few years. So hopefully this wet pattern will help. Will hang in there and help us out. And like I said, irrigation also will be starting in about a week and a half. Sure got around here pretty quick. The winter didn't seem to last very long, so it's hard to believe another irrigation season starting up here soon. So just cinch the belt and hold on, see what it gives us.
Raymond, this is Longworth. Have you gotten a word of what the allocations or allotments are down in the project, Rio Grande project?
No, I haven't. I'm not sure how they're going to do that this year. If they're going to pump early and then hold on to the water later in the year like they did last year, or what. I haven't heard.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious. Thanks.
Anyone else have any questions? All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Raymond. All right, I don't know. I didn't hear. Is Chris on the line? Chris Haynes? I didn't think so. And I didn't get any NRCS snow reports this month. Did you get any, Brian?
I did not.
No.
Other than what we coordinated on our water supply.
Okay.
No.
All right. I'll try and get a hold of Chris just to send a reminder. And I didn't know if I haven't heard from Anne Marie either.
Neither have I.
Okay. Give those folks a call. All right, so we'll move on to the state engineer's report. Are you doing it, Ken, or John?
I'm not sure, John. Am I doing this? I thought I was.
Yeah, no, Ken's doing that.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want to control the mouse and everything too? Or did you just let me know when you want to go? Okay.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead. You're good.
All right. So I'm just going to present a graphical view of the reservoir levels that Raymond just kind of gave. Our data comes from Friday, February 20th for current storage, and then January 16th for last month. So if you guys are probably familiar with our presentation, the yellow sidebars represent last year, the center blue bar represents current, the red line represents average, and the green dotted line represents last month. So I'm just going to go through these. There's nothing really major from last month to this month. So this is Navajo. Okay. Next one's Ute. You can see same, are almost exactly. I have like 147 for last month's storage and 148 for this month. Santa Rosa. Down there. Brantley. And I think this is probably the biggest percent difference from this month and last month. And this next slide is just all the numbers that we had in used tabular form.
So do you know if those changes from last month, are they from just moving the water down, or are they just the inflow differences?
Well, Heron itself would have been, sending the contractors' waters down to Ovado and to Abiquiu. And then in Ovado, we're starting to store just a little bit of water for prior Paramount and for the Drought Agreement Act. So.
And it seems like the nice flow into Elephant Butte, bringing us up to, what did you say, 321?
Yeah, plus the 35,000 at
in Caballo.
So we can get enough runoff to get that up over 400,000 before they start releasing, and hopefully we can start storing even more water in Ovado. But all depends on Mother Nature. Got to get above that 400,000 so we can store.
Okay. More. So that's the goal. That's why we're keeping the flow running, to get it up to the 400 if they can.
Yeah, if we can. Like I said, the irrigation starts in a week and a half, and that's pretty much what the district is going to have to use. Is just what's in the river right now.
Okay. Yeah, I've been getting calls about that, just so that I know what to answer, what to say.
Yeah, so if you take that plus Caballo, get up over 400,000, and we can got a store in Ovado. The same with Colorado, with Petoro.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, any questions for Ken or John Longworth? Okay, thanks for the report, guys. And okay, so move on to the NMDA. Anything to add, Ryan?
Hi. No, we don't have a lot to add. It doesn't look like there's a lot being grown this time of year, so we'll just go ahead and pass. Thanks.
Okay. And is our, and I guess I've been asked the same question too, is if you could, if you come across any impacts similar to what was mentioned earlier about the fence post, when you do your travels or when you talk to Les or other folks, feel free to forward them on. However small they are, they will be useful, and that's something we should probably do more of. Is just if you have anything to provide us.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that would be great.
I'll talk to Les about that.
Okay.
When he gets back.
Yeah, because
Thank you.
Yeah, because it seemed like we're information starved in terms of the impacts. The real things that are going on out there in terms of forage and soil moisture and things like that. Okay.
Forage and soil moisture. All right. Sounds good. I'll talk with him about that.
Let's start with those.
Sounds great.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Brian.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I got an email from Joy Lynn this morning. They unfortunately have a scheduling conflict this morning. They have a bi-weekly call. And she said she will be sending a summary sometime today on the disaster declarations. So I will forward that to everybody as soon as I get that. Get an update on FSA. Okay, so we're at the point where if there's any other topics that we need to discuss before we move on, feel free to speak up.
Dave, this is Longworth. You said Joy Lynn said there's a disaster declaration?
Well, she said she was going to forward a summary on the disaster declarations for drought that affect New Mexico. I'm reading it word for word here. So I don't know. She didn't say what they were.
For 2015, starting 2015?
Probably, yeah. Probably, end of year and where we were kind of our baseline. That's my guess.
Okay.
But we'll find out.
Yeah, if you could get that out, that's helpful as a Interstate Stream Commission meeting in a couple days. I'd probably be interested in that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else?
This is Richard Heim again. What's the resolution as far as recommendations for changes to the drought monitor map for New Mexico for this week?
Well, I think we were wanting to look more at the Northeast a little bit, but I think based off of what you were saying with Colorado, they're probably not going to make any changes up north. And are there any adjustments that need to be made with Texas?
The Texas changes were already made. As far as it impacts New Mexico, is just that very northwest corner of the Panhandle.
So did they also have, going further east, the same amount of precip that we had? I haven't looked at Texas recently. I don't know. Did you?
When you say going east,
looking further east, is there basically the same amount of precip has been falling in the northeast New Mexico as in the Panhandle, Texas, and that's more of my question.
Just looking at the ACES maps, it looks like the pattern of precipitation amounts pretty much crosses the state line. As far as the northeast corner, about the same amount as the northwest corner of the Panhandle. Farther south, it's less precip on the New Mexico side, less precip on the Texas side. It looks like it's pretty similar in terms of actual amount.
Yeah, I saw that Brian put up. Because the question I had was that D3 as you go into Texas Panhandle? I mean, it looks like the precip in the February precip has missed that. So Nielsen-Gavin is probably going to keep that.
I think a lot of that in in the Texas Panhandle and north central Texas and southwest Oklahoma is related back to the very long-term drought conditions. I'm looking at the Western Region Climate Center West-Right Drought Tracker, SPI, and at 72 months, it's very intense along the Arkansas Red River, north central Texas, not quite as red in the Panhandle, but the SPI values are about the same shade. I'd say minus 1.5 to minus 2 in the Texas Panhandle as they are in northeast New Mexico at 72 months, and 60 months about the same. 48 months. The Panhandle has some minus 2 to minus 2.5. That very red does not cross into northeast New Mexico at 48 months.
Although there's an area in Curry County that's in that 2 to 2.5.
Yeah, it looks like the dryness is a little bit more intense in the Texas Panhandle than it is in northeast New Mexico at 48 months on the SPI.
Yeah, you're right.
And this ends at January 2015. It's a monthly product. I see you're looking at a different SPI product, but I guess it's the same thing. I'm looking at the gridded one, and you're looking at the divisional one.
Okay, yeah.
But the gridded one has a much finer spatial resolution. But it's the really long-term dryness that's showing up there. On the Texas state products that they use during the Texas Drought Monitor conference calls, it only goes out to about 18 months and maybe 24 months, and that just doesn't capture the 4-year drought conditions. So which is why I like to rely upon the Western region stuff a lot, because it goes out to the 4-year, 5-year, 6-year time scales. And true, it's going to take forever to make up those deficits, but it's still the impacts from that length of dryness are still showing up. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole...
That's the format SPI they have.
Yeah. But on the West-Wide Drought Tracker, the whole east side of the state, all the way... 72 months, they're in that 2 to... the minus 1.5 to 2, pretty much the whole east, northeast.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So I guess it's always the question of, we've got really good short term. If you look at the, 6 months even SPI, we're in the 0. And all 1 month we got it in the 2 or greater. But yeah, and then and it's totally off the. It's drastic in the 60, 72 month. Very different picture.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that long-term, multi-year dryness that you can see on the long-term Western Region SPI and SPEI products is being reflected in the reservoir levels.
Yeah.
And which I think are a very important indicator.
Yeah, that's my main concern with central New Mexico. With that. So what we're saying is we're basically not a lot of edits to this week.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking status quo, unless there's something urgent that you thought would need to be made.
I think this is Brian again. If we could maybe see what the next 10 days has for us, or 10 to 14 days, we could maybe consider some changes the following week.
I would be happy with that.
Okay. All right.
Just one last point, Dave. I wanted to highlight some work that I've done in the past month. This is more for the water resources management folks, just as a reference for them. We created some a feature on our webpage that we haven't released yet. I'm still working on some of the HTML for it, but they're basically just climatologies of the runoff across the area. And so if you hover over these various triangles, you can look at what the median discharges are for various river gauges across the state. So this is an example for the Animas River at Farmington, just showing the peak of 2,940 CFS around late May for that point. So they're just references, reference tables or charts for folks to kind of get a better idea, but what we should be looking at in terms of our peak runoff on average and what time of year that occurs at.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, those are very useful.
Hey, Brian?
Yes.
Hey, Brian, did you ever consider showing that also for the reservoirs in southern Colorado, since a lot of your contributing water comes out of the San Juans and Santa Cristos up there?
That's a good point. I just looked at this, right here by Farmington, but yeah, it would be easy to expand. I've just got the Azotea Tunnel, which we're pulling the water from Colorado, so that would be really the only point. But I can easily add some of that. And then I'm also trying to work on getting this developed into an Esri story map so that folks can interact more with the actual map itself and zoom into some of these river points. So it's just a work in progress. I wanted to let folks know it is out there. Will probably be maybe another week.
Okay.
And we'll have that featured on our webpage.
Very, very nice.
Well, Brian, let me know when you do, and we'll link to it on our Facebook and Twitter pages at West Gulf RC.
Okay, will do, Greg.
Good work.
Thank you.
Hey, Dave. I have a quick question. It looks like, and I can't tell from the map, that area in South Central that's in D Nada, D0, and looking at the snowtel in the Sacramento Mountains, at the Sierra Blanca snowtel site is below normal, has been all year for SWE, and that area is in D0 or D Nada. How much is that reliant on runoff for creeks there and other usages?
Well, from I think we had a talk at one of the task force meetings, and I think it's very important with the cities, because they rely on the runoff from that. Because I remember we had discussions about wildfire impacts and how that has impacted the drinking water. So I think that is a critical number. And I just pulled up the Ruidoso webcam, looking at the snow on Sierra Blanca, and it looks only the very tops of all the peaks have snow on it. They were clouded yesterday. I'm just curious. So yeah, it looks pretty low in terms of where we are.
I mean, it looks like kind of the same story we've been seeing in all the mountains since the summer in New Mexico and Arizona, for that matter, where the accumulated precipitation is slightly above average, but snowpack is running below average. And I was just wondering if that's something you wanted to, because I'm up next week.
Okay.
That's an area we might want to consider expanding, at least the D0. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, let's look at that. I think we should look at that. Keep an eye on that. I'm looking at the Sierra Blanca snowtel, and not a lot has been going on this month.
Yeah, and this is Curtis. That Sierra Blanca snowtel. We are above from last year, but well off of the average. We're about, in 2013, we're about 2 inches shorter than that, and we rarely saw any runoff in 13.
Good point.
So, just some reference points there.
Yeah. And I'm looking at those surrounding observations and not seeing a lot of action the last 30 days. There's a Kokoraz and Alto really haven't seen much since the end of January.
And it's been quite warm there.
Yeah.
Luckily, we haven't lost a lot of it this past month. It's been kind of steady, but it's a concern, especially with the warmer weather down there.
So, Dave, I think that's good point. We should start looking at that. Okay.
All right. Yeah, just let's keep the dialogue going. If you guys have anything more to add, later in the week, early next week.
Great. Cool.
This is Longworth again. I think this is another one of those situations like the Gila. If we start getting the winds, it's just probably a little bit more of a flashpoint area because of Ruidoso and Alamogordo's water supply comes out of these mountains, but it's a very similar setup if we get those winds without the intermittent precipitation to kind of keep the dirt down a little bit.
Oh, yes. Okay. Any last comments before we schedule the next call? Right. Alrighty. So for next month, we've got the climate prediction workshop on the week of the 23rd, starting on the 24th. CPC updates on the 19th. That's the Thursday before that week. So what do you got? I know several of us are going to be at that meeting. A handful of us on the call. So what about 23rd, the day before CPAWS? Is that workable? Other than that, the second choice potentially could be that Friday, 27th, after the meeting. What's the availability, Brian?
I think the 23rd would probably be better.
Okay.
I'm on the overnight shift and Chuck is off, but I don't know if that would be an issue. Doing an hour and a half call or not.
Okay.
So I probably would be out for the next one if it's during that period, but that's fine. I think doing it before the meeting might be better, as folks might be kind of spent after that meeting.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know.
So does anybody have any issues with the 23rd? No?
Works for me.
Works for you guys? Okay.
So that's a Monday.
That's a Monday? Just a reminder. Does anybody have any problems with the Monday meetings? Okay. Okay. So let's do that. Let's
10
have
o'clock at the same time, 10 o'clock?
Let's do that. Will that work for folks? 10 o'clock? We remember we're on a different time. Daylight savings that ends on the 8th, right? Of March?
Yeah.
So for the drought monitor, folks, just a reminder. Okay, so next meeting, March 23rd, 10 a.m. Mountain Time. And if any other reports come in, we'll forward them out to the group. And then, if Brian, if you get any, can you also forward them out? Sent to you. And just a reminder, send all your reports to Brian. And you have his email from the reminder. So all the reports, and I will follow up with folks who haven't heard from in a while. And then I will also follow up on the forestry and anybody else who has contacts. Please make those engagements, see what's going on with our forests. So, okay, I think that's it for this call.